Good morning, everyone. My name is Clayton Lulin, and I'm the Marketing Manager here at Family Office Metrics. I'd like to welcome you to the first in this three-part series of webinars, Finding, Optimizing, and Rewarding Talent in the Family Office. But before we get underway, I've got a few bits of housekeeping that I need to cover. We are offering CPE credits for this webinar. To receive your 2 credit hours, you must stay online through the entire presentation, answer all of our poll questions that we ask during the webinar, and then complete a quick survey that will appear after the webinar is over or when you close the webinar window. One of those survey questions will ask if you would like to receive CPE credit, so make sure you answer yes if you would like to receive your credits. Once you do those things, I will send you a link to complete your $49 payment, and then you will receive your CPE certificate via email. This webinar is being recorded, so if you have to leave early or get disconnected, you will receive an email with a link to view the recording. Note that you cannot receive CPE credit for viewing the recording. There will be a Q&A session with John following the webinar, so ask your questions via the Questions tab on the GoToWebinar software. If for any reason we don't get to your question during the webinar, we will follow up with you. Also, don't forget to check out our website, FamilyOfficeMetrics.com, where you can register for all of our events and upcoming speaking engagements, not to mention submit your resume or position descriptions and be a part of our executive placement program. Our website is also the best place to get details on the many consulting services FOM has to offer FOs, wealth advisors, as well as technology and service providers. It is now my pleasure to welcome John Carroll, the President and CEO of Family Office Metrics. Good morning, John.
Thank you, Clayton, for that introduction, and good morning. And also good morning to everyone online with us today. Thank you, as always, for taking time out of your busy schedules to join me in what I hope is a rewarding and informative conversation with you about the management and oversight and rewarding of human resources in the single-family office. I want to start by saying a few words about Family Office Metrics. I know many of you know who we are, but some of you may not. I founded the firm 15 years ago after working 7 years in a family office as a CFO and then a COO. And we are committed to our clients and achieving successful outcomes for our clients on a range of business management issues. So our practice spans from management consulting to consulting around operational practices, especially best practices, and also includes consulting on technology, systems and technology. So we focus purely and simply on the family office. Most of our revenue as consultants is earned working with single family offices. Our typical client is $1 billion plus single family office. And our focus is on the client's needs and meeting those needs. So we are delighted to be in this business. We love it. And we were honored this year, in fact, to receive the winning award from the Family Wealth Report for management consultancies to the family office industry. So we've achieved a little recognition, but the best recognition we've gotten is from many satisfied clients, over 150 of those satisfied clients to date. As I mentioned, I spoke mostly about consulting, but I want to mention that we are a research-based consultancy. We do a lot of research. I'm going to share some research with you today, and of course, we're also involved in education, and this is an example of that type of education that we do. Clayton, next slide. So this series around human resources is based upon our 15-year history of business consulting casework with single-family offices. And we hope to cover the topic in sort of 3 major subjects: finding the right personnel from both perspectives, those of the candidates and also from the family office; optimizing the performance and measuring the optimal performance and setting goals, goal setting and all of that, both from a family and a candidate's or an employee's perspective; and then finally rewarding, and by that we mean principally focus on compensation and different types of programs. So this is the first in the series. We're going to stretch this series over the next several months. I think we've got a really good background to present our thinking on this, and we hope that the series provides you with ideas that you can take home and improve your own business and or your approach to working with clients, and also to help you enable a more successful outcomes. So let's move to the next slide, Clayton. Today we're going to cover these topics in our agenda. I'm going to do a short introduction and then kind of set up the series and how we got into this. I'm going to talk a little bit about the market dynamics, what's going on in the marketplace right now, and then I'm going to focus on the three major topics of the presentation today. First being search, and by that I mean the search and for a candidate, and also the search that a candidate does for a new family office. And so throughout this presentation and throughout this series, in fact, I'm going to be taking both the family and the candidate's perspective, and eventually the candidate becomes an employee. So I'll take in this instance, when we're talking about search and selection and compensation trends, we're going to be looking at it from the perspective of the family, the buyer, and also from the perspective of the candidate, so in other words, the seller. So search, looking for the job, and then the selection process, which is really important. We have some, based upon our own experience, we have some ideas about what successful steps are in the selection process and where the emphasis should be in the selection process. And then finally, we'll spend a few minutes talking about compensation trends based upon a recent study that we completed of family offices, single family offices, in conjunction with Trish Botoff, who is an expert in the field. And wrapping, as Clayton mentioned, with some Q&A at the end. I'll leave a few minutes for a Q&A at the end, and we can answer your questions as you pose them, and are looking forward to having a successful webinar today. So next slide, Clayton. The webinar itself is going to focus on both the buy side and the sell side, and while it's composed of three components in this series: the search and selection, managing human resources, and compensation structures, we are throughout going to try to shed some light on topic from both the buyer's perspective, in other words, the family, the board of the trustees, the executives who are looking to bring in talent into the family office, and also shed some light or provide a perspective on topic to the candidates, or as we go on through the series, the employees. So key to remember that we're taking both sides here. I hope that there's enough and something in here for each type of person who is on this webinar and participating in this conversation, so that you take something away, whether you are looking for talent or whether you are a talent looking for a new home. So we got into this business, and Clayton, why don't you flip to the next slide, by really just doing what we do, which is consulting. We don't represent ourselves as an executive search firm. Later on, I'm going to give you some information about some top-notch executive search firms, retained search firms. We sort of backed into this business through our consulting, and our consulting method is, as I've shown here on the left, basically a very standard model where we plan the work, we go in and assess the issues, make recommendations, and review and confirm all those recommendations and alternative solutions, and agree to a course of action. Then we execute the change that's required as a result of the assessment. That can be an implementation, that can be a transition, that can be any number of things. And then finally, after it's all done, we work with our client to review the outcomes and measure success, and also to determine next steps, which oftentimes lead into a plan for the next phase of work. But the point about the consulting method is that I think it's highly applicable to the search for talent in the single-family office. And the reason I think that is because it's been our experience over the last 15 years and working with over 150 clients that at the end of many assessments, the change that we're recommending is to oftentimes outsource activities, but oftentimes to hire personnel in the family office, or to educate and train existing personnel, or to augment and re-engineer the staff in ways that would add human capital to the equation. So, you know, the consulting method has driven us to an outcome, oftentimes which leads to recommending the addition or the re-engineering or the change of human capital. And obviously that's a result of our consulting focus. And you know, when you look at the way that we approach the business of working with our clients, there are three major activities or elements or components that we focus on. And one is people. And people drive the process. And they actually execute the process. And the process is enabled by the technology. And sometimes the technology can augment or improve the work effort, the labor content done by the people. So it is a circular and mutually supportive set of components, but people are a huge part of what we do when we work with our clients. So to that end, you know, we had an opportunity over the last several years to help our clients find the right talent for their positions. So next slide, you can see that last year we had three successful searches. We were engaged by three separate clients to work in three engagements as a result of the consulting work that we were already doing with them. So in each one of these cases, we were engaged as a consultant, and as it turned out, one of the answers to the consulting problem presented was to add staff, and we found an interim CEO for a single-family office. We identified a CFO for a single-family office. We identified an investment committee member for a single-family office. And this year, we've carried on. And so we're in process right now and underway with some different searches, one for a controller, one for an executive assistant, one for a client service manager, and one for a financial analyst. So we've got some sort of hands-on experience doing this. And I think what we've learned as a result over the last couple of years of doing this work, we're going to start to share with you in this webinar series. So let's go to the next slide, Clayton, and I'm going to stop now and ask the first question of 6 that we need to ask to award CPE credit to those who are interested in it. But even if you're not interested in the CPE credit, I'd appreciate it if you would take or answer the question here. So the question is, how would you describe yourself? And this is kind of a softball, but are you a candidate seeking a position? Or are you a family office seeking a candidate? Maybe you're neither of those, but you're an interested party. And if none of those other answers apply, then you know, you check none of the above. So I think that I guess you could be a party and not an interested party. I guess you'd be an uninterested party. But I will be interested to see how many, you know, what the composition is of the people online today, and what their, you know, that will give me some information about what they want to take away. Okay, so we've got a pretty good mix of 40-40-20, but basically. So we got 40% interested parties, professionals, those who are in the business and interested on the topic. We've got 40% family offices seeking candidate. Awesome. So hopefully we'll give you some information today to improve your search. And then we've got some people online who are looking for a position. So let's move on then to the next slide, which is our discussion of market dynamics. And just to reiterate, when I talk about these things, I want to talk about them in from the perspective of both families and candidates. So moving on to the next slide, Clayton, I think it's clear that single-family offices, which are our principal and target client, are everywhere. This is something that Paul and I know very, very well, that they are spread across the U.S., and even though some states are not represented here, that's just because we haven't had a relationship with a client relationship with a family office, a single family office in that state. Doesn't mean they don't exist in that state. Of course they do. But the point is that they are everywhere. And so when you're a family thinking about how to find the right talent, you know, obviously there are limitations of geography, and you can see according to our little map that the Northeast, that Boston to Baltimore corridor is pretty tightly packed. You see a real concentration in the upper Midwest. You see a concentration in Texas and in South Florida, and you see a concentration, of course, in California, especially LA and the Bay Area. But the point is that it's not family offices, as you can see from this map, and these are family offices that we work with, are not just in the major SMSAs in the U.S., not just in the major, you know, metropolitan areas. They are everywhere, and so that should give hope not only to people who are looking for help, but also people who are looking for a family office to work in. So if we move to the next slide, you know, they're everywhere, and I think it's fair to say that their numbers keep growing. Based upon some recent studies done by WealthX and UBS, the number of ultra high net worths, and I'm just focused here on the USA now, in the top chart, is growing, you know, at a pretty good clip. Over, you know, with ultra high net worths over 500 million, it's growing at a 5% rate between 2012 and 2013. If you look at world wealth growth, 2013 to 2014, and just look at the billionaires, the chart down below, you see that that's almost 12% per annum. Now, you know, there's a lot of billionaire wealth being created outside the U.S., and so that accounts for the difference between you know, the growth rates between the USA and the world. But even in North America, which includes Canada in this instance, you see that the billionaire growth rate is 10%, basically double what the growth rate has been in a different year for the $500 million plus crowd. So I think it's fair to say, based upon this general information, that you know, the number of high net worths is growing. We saw in the earlier slide that family offices are everywhere. There's just a lot of wealth being created, and at the high end, and so therefore this business model of family office, I think, is not dead, much to the dismay of people who have been proclaiming its death for a decade now. It is, I think it's alive and growing nicely. We are experiencing that in our business with a serious uptick in business activity over the last 18 months. And I think that's generally what we hear from the marketplace. And there are more people searching for help now than and staff and talent than there were several years ago. There's no question of that. And likewise, there are more people who are open to new positions just because of the improved economic environment, especially in this domain where special skills and talents are required. So I think just on one final note on this, it's not on the slide, but I think if you look at Forbes 400, it starts at 1.3 or 1.4 billion now, something like that. So I think if you stretch down to a billion, you'll see that there's probably more than 400. There's probably like 500 names on the list. Anyway, the number is growing, and next slide, Clayton. According to again to WealthX and UBS, as we see on the next slide, the growth rate is expected to continue. I'm not exactly sure what causes them to be this optimistic about it, but it may have to do with their economic models of world economic growth. Of course, this assumes that there are no black swan events, I would imagine. But in any case, over the next 6 years, from 2014 to 2020, you can see that they're forecasting a growth in billionaires from roughly around 2,300 to something like, I don't know, 3,800, 3,900, something like that. So while I don't, have an exact number, I think that the compound annual growth rate of billionaires in the world over the next 6 years is forecast to be about 7.5%. And that's a pretty healthy growth rate for billionaires. And every billionaire that I know has a single-family office. And we work with many billionaires in the Forbes 400. And by the way, we work with a number of billionaires who are not in the Forbes 400. So for sure, there are more billionaires than are represented, and billionaire families that are represented by doing some analysis on the Forbes 400 as a percent of total. But the point is that compound annual growth rate of 7.5% over the next 6 years is a very healthy outlook, and I think that bodes well for people who are looking for work in the industry, and also it means that as time goes on, the competition for good talent will increase for those family offices who want the very best people working for them. So let's move on to the next slide, Clayton, and talk a little bit about what skills are in demand. And this, again, is based upon our understanding of the market and our casework. But there are really two sorts of skills, I think, that are in demand. And one I'm calling technical skills, and the other I'm calling holistic skills. I know that holistic sounds a little touchy-feely, but what I'm trying to do there is represent a set of skills that are not learned in school, and they're not learned through a professional practice necessarily, but are learned through experience and maturity and having an elevated sense of judgment. But first, let's just talk about the technical skills. The technical skills, I think, are, I think you all recognize the big four there: investments, and a topic that is especially hot in the investment area right now, that we see families interested in and expanding their portfolios in terms of construction toward, is direct investing. And that can be not just through funds, PE funds, but also investing directly in companies and taking sometimes a more active role in the management of those companies and sitting on boards, but oftentimes just investing a significant amount of their capital in the private company, and oftentimes as a co-investor with another family, or with a manager that they really respect, or with someone who they feel that they can piggyback not only the due diligence but also the ongoing monitoring of the direct investment. So there's a lot of flavors of direct investing, but that's an area that's really, really, I think, hot right now. And so having background or technical skill in the direct investing area is one that's in demand. That we see for for not only for CIOs but for analysts. The other area is seeding hedge funds, and there's a lot of interest in seeding young managers and working to grow a strategy from the outset, as opposed to investing in a strategy that's proven, or worse yet, in investing in a fund that allows the manager to cash out. So seeding ventures, it's kind of like direct investing, except for it's directing in an investment manager as opposed to direct investing in a company. But that sort of direct investment is, I think, really hot. Planning, another technical skill that is very, very much in demand, especially planning around comprehensive financial life and activities for family members, but overall managing their economics and their risk posture. And planning, and especially risk management as a part of the planning process is an area that has really, of course, blossomed since the financial crisis 2008. There's much more interest on the behalf of families and family offices in skills and expertise in risk management. The final two, tax and accounting and legal, are, of course, the evergreens. They are always in demand. Tax awareness and tax knowledge, and, of course, the ability to control and account for assets and liabilities and valuing of assets and liabilities to produce NAVs is a real need. It never goes away. It's always in demand. And likewise, the legal experience and capability, especially around as it relates to not only investments and investing, but also the establishment of private trust company. And this is obviously an opportunity for some of those of you who are trained as lawyers to explore that role in a way with a family to avoid registration with the SEC, to produce an institutional and succession plan, and provide for a corporate structure to allow the orderly transfer of wealth from one generation to the next. And as a lawyer or as a president of a trust company, of a private trust company, you can also serve as a trustee, a co-trustee alongside of the trust company. But for the most part, it allows you to assign the trusteeship to the institution. So there's a real demand for private trust company knowledge, and it seems to be an area that continues to occupy the thinking of very, very large single-family offices who are looking for ways to avoid the continuous sort of connection to individuals and want to institutionalize their legacy in the family office. And now that sort of covers the technical skill sets. The holistic skill sets, I think, are ones that are really starting to come to the fore, and we see this a lot, in our casework with clients. But our clients are really more and more discerning and more demanding about the leadership skills, the business acumen, and the talents of their top executives to to lead the business, because more and more families are recognizing that this is a business and it requires professional business leadership and management. And that is, I think that's something that you have it, you've got it, you know what we're talking about, or you're learning it, but it's not something that you just are born with necessarily. I think you develop it as you go through your career, and families are looking for that. And another sort of holistic skill that families are looking for and really interested in is the ability to communicate. And this communication issue is especially important now as next gen is coming into roles of responsibility, or just growing up and being engaged in the family itself more broadly as part of the operating company, or just as family members. Because, as you know, those of you on this call with me know, there is a tremendous divide between the elders and the next generation, especially around communication, the way that they communicate, the tools that they use to communicate, the urgency with which they communicate, the comfort that they feel with sharing. All of those are all different elements, or I should say those are all elements that are perceived differently by the generations. And so the ability to communicate with the next gen about the importance of the family and its values and the structure and especially governance and roles and responsibilities are really, really key, which ties into the third sort of holistic skill set that is really important. And we see more and more families spending resources to engage somebody, oftentimes in a full-time role, to be an educator. They don't necessarily call it an educator, but we'll couch it in terms of administration or training or service. But the real key here is education, and that is education. Not, I know you hear a lot about next generation education, but it's not just for the next generation. It's also for the adult generation who is ready to transition. It includes the elders, by the way. So elders need information about how to react in the new environment, and especially with the new dynamic going on in the family, and also new events occurring. So in the financial world. And so I think that education, whatever its name, is a really important skill set that, and in fact, I think these holistic skills they may not be quite equal yet with the technical skills when families are looking, but I'll tell you this, from my experience, it's check the box on the technical skills and then focus on the holistic skills. That's what makes the difference in the sort of the selection process. So let's move on to the next slide, Clayton, and talk about how how do you find a position? Well, how do you find a candidate? It's tough. It's not easy. If you're looking for a position, you're gonna talk to the people you know. You're gonna probably reach out to some search firms. You're gonna talk to some other family offices. You'll reach out to the financial institutions, and the accounting firms, and the law firms, and the investment firms, all the professionals that you know, and say, I'm thinking about just moving. And of course, you have to be discreet because you have a position. You don't want to jeopardize that. So it's hard to reach out, and it's hard to find out what's going on if you're in a position where you're not unhappy, but you're also thinking about your career, and there's something that's motivating you to consider a move. By the way, families have the same problem. They are put in the same exact sort of place that you are, looking for a position, looking for a candidate. I mean, what do they do? Well, they talk to the people they know in their network. They engage a search firm. They talk to other family offices that they have maybe been introduced to by the search firm or that they know, and they tap into their professionals. So they really don't have any different mechanism to get to you, a candidate, than you have to get to them, a family office. Of course, when you work with as a family looking for a position, assuming that all of the other mechanisms fail, your network fails, or that you just don't feel qualified or competent, and you want to engage a professional to help you do this, well, they're acting as your agent, and they're going to go out and tap into all those different types of firms and networks that they have. And of course, search firms call us. They call us and ask us, say, do you know anybody? Or they send us emails, or they reach out to us and say, we're looking for this sort of a candidate. And so, I would add to this list consulting firms, but not so much, because most consulting firms don't deal in the family office space like we do. But I think that the challenges are very, very similar for both people seeking positions and people who are seeking a candidate. And so that's why finding another way is oftentimes an approach that is beneficial. But search firms do a tremendous service in the industry and act as intermediaries. So let's go to the next slide, because right here on this slide, I'm listing firms and people that I know are top-tier people. And I have no qualms at all recommending that you reach out to any of these people, because worked with them all, seen the work that they've done, and am extremely confident that any one of these can provide you with the outcome that you're looking for. Now, when you work with a search firm, of course, a lot of it's chemistry. You've got to feel good about their reach. The thing is that not all search firms know about family office. I think one of the special things about this list is that everybody on this list knows about family office in depth and have placed family office executives. I will say that a retained search firm is focused principally on the highest level roles in the office. And so, and remember there's that word retained there, so you've got to retain them, and it's usually not a trivial sum to retain them, to exclusively run the search for you, but you get what you pay for too. So I think it's important to remember that you've got to commit, and I don't think you could find a better list of retained search firms than the one I presented right here to start with, if that's what you need. Now, one of the things that these firms do and that we do at Family Office Metrics is very similar, and of course I can't speak for precisely how they do what they do, but I know that they do something like this when they meet with a client for the first time, and that's, let's go to the next slide. That's what I would call the consultative approach. So the consultative approach is it's like a process, and it's a process that we use. I mean, we use this process. Obviously, the search firms have retained search firms have their own process. They're professionals. They will present you their approach. But this is the consultative approach, and we think it works really, really well when working with families to figure out what their needs are. So when we start the process, we start with a plan. Then we take that plan and we use that plan to assess the current situation. And after we've assessed that current situation, we recommend alternative solutions and some sort of change program. And once we've implemented that change program, we come back and do a review, which points back to potentially some additional planning and some continuation of work. There's nothing magic about this, but this is our process, and the consultative approach we think works really, really well. So, for instance, just in the first box on the left under planning, you see I've got a bullet there called business model. That means what sort of business model are we running? Is this a single person family office who's looking for an assistant? Is it a corporate structure where there's a CEO reporting to a board, and there's a CFO and a CIO and a CTO and a client service person and a tax department and accounting department and so on and so forth. So there are lots of different models of structures, and you really need to understand what the business model you have is, where you're, and not only what it is, but where you're headed. Part of that planning needs to be around continuity and succession. And finally, part of the planning needs to be about managing risk and controlling risk. And one of the ways that we control risk, of course, is through what? Planning. And it's through what? Communication. And it's through what? It's through a structured process. So planning, communication, structured process mitigate risk, control risk, allow you to identify risks as they rear their heads through your process. After the planning is done, we go into assessment. We assess the governance structure, that is the relationship between the family and the family office, how the decisions get made. We assess the culture in the office. A key element of the process is the culture in the office. If you don't understand the culture in the office, the culture of the family, and by the way, that all the culture of the family finds its way into the office and creates the current for the river flowing to the sea. That's the culture, and you need to assess it and understand it and be able to describe it. And then finally, you assess skill sets. And sometimes in this assessment process, we discover, hey, we need talent. Or, hey, maybe we should outsource. Or, hey, maybe we should re-engineer what we've got, and we can solve our problems without additional talent, without outsourcing. But in any case, we come up with a change plan. And the change plan, in this case, when we're talking about human resources, it involves interviews. And I'm going to talk about interviews because interviews to me is that interview process is the most important part of the structured process in this whole thing. And it's the most important to the interviewer, and it's the most important to the interviewee. And this is based upon my experience as both, and as one who has managed this process, the interview is just key. And so we're going to spend some time later on talking about that. But after the interview is done, there's a negotiation, and this is where the rubber meets the road around compensation and benefits and perquisites and quality of life and you name it. And then there's obviously the hiring. And typically there's a contract. And finally, after the change is implemented, you go back and review it. You document what you've done through descriptions and the like. And you also go back for a 360 review, going back to all the stakeholders that you addressed in the assessment process and get their input about how it turned out. How do they believe that the goals were met? And if there are adjustments required, you adjust, and then you circle back to planning. So the consultative approach is the approach, in my mind, to finding the best people in the best talent. And by the way, we can turn that on its head, and you can say, as a candidate, I'm going to use that as consultative approach to really understand the family office that's interviewing me. What kind of business model do they have? What sort of risk controls? What's the succession plan over there? What's the culture like in the family? Who else works in the office? What are their skills? How do decisions get made? Who am I talking to in the interview? Am I just talking to my boss? Am I talking to the family? What is the interview? And finally, what sort of documentation have they presented me to negotiate and close the deal? So I think you can use this consultative approach whether you're a buyer or a seller. So Clayton, let's go on to our next slide, which is question number 2. So question number 2, according to the WealthX and UBS study, that we just talked about. What is the expected compound annual growth rate for billionaires around the world between 2014 and 2020? So we talked about that, and I said it was a pretty hefty growth rate, but is hefty 2% or 5% or 7.5%? So the growth rate for billionaires, and of course billionaires means family offices, is a pretty hefty growth rate. And is it 2%, 5%, or 7.5%? What do you think? Look at that. 70% got the right answer. It is 7.5%, and congratulations to you. By the way, if you're taking this exam for CPE credit, even if you get the wrong answer, if 5% is the wrong answer, 2% is the wrong answer, the growth rate, the CAGR is about 7.5% over the next 6 years, according to WealthX and UBS. Even if you select incorrectly, doesn't matter. What matters is that you're here to answer the question, and that we have a record of that. So now we're going to go into first topic, and that topic is search. And as I said, we're going to do try to enlighten you on this topic from both the family and the candidate's perspective. So let's go to the next slide, Clayton. I'm starting this topic with a quote from a very, very important consultant and well-known consultant to the family office industry, Catherine McCarthy. And Catherine was quoted as saying in an article just recently that, quote, if you look at the average family office, which is an oxymoron, in other words, there is no average family office, leadership in and of itself is not well defined or understood. And that's a big deal because that affects the recruitment process enormously. So leadership in and of itself is not well defined or understood, and that's a big deal because that lack of understanding or definition affects the recruitment process enormously. Now, Catherine says this, and I could not agree more. That's why I put it up here. Because I think there's a huge disconnect or misunderstanding on behalf of families about the difference between leading and managing. Leadership is different from management. And I think that's what Catherine is alluding to here. She is saying that leadership in and of itself is not well defined or understood. And so I think the best way to describe leadership and to understand it is to define it, and define it in relationship to management, which is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do that and provide you with some examples, some little case studies that I think should enlighten this point. But this is a really, really important point. And I think it's important for families who are looking to hire. It's also really important for candidates who are looking to make the move into a position which is likely to be a promotion. So none other than the great Sayer, the elder statesman of management consulting, Peter Drucker. I mean, this is really a hackneyed and old. I mean, by the way, I've been using this statement for 15, 20 years. But you know what? It's one of those evergreens. It's a cliche because it's true. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. And Catherine's point about leadership is not well understood or defined, here we're defining it relative to management. So leadership is doing the right things. That means having vision. And that means being able to make sense of the current situation, being able to, to comprehend and see through the day-to-day ups and downs and ins and outs, and project a vision into the future. To be able to envision or imagine the future state. That's what leadership does. And that future state is what Drucker is calling the right thing. Now, of course, he's being more general and I'm being more specific, but that's my take on it. So I'm gonna go through a couple of different examples of case studies that point out the difference between leadership and management, and I'm going to use the examples like my little graphic is showing. When leadership, that's a CEO is a leader, not a manager. Somebody who works for a CEO, like a chief technology officer or a chief investment officer or a chief financial officer, that person's a manager. Likewise, leadership can be shown at a board level. We're expecting our board members to be leaders, to not be so focused on all the details, but to really have the vision, to have the best interests of the family and the entity at heart, the trust, thinking about the trust and thinking about the protecting the assets of the trust and growing those assets. So that, and looking into the future and saying, what are the risks? So it goes back to risk management, right? It goes back to thinking about risk, planning, and thinking about a process, but thinking about the future and being able to envision that future state, and then directing the current business to do the things. In other words, have managers do the things correctly that will lead us to the right thing ultimately. So let's go to the first case study, Clayton, on the next slide. And I'm calling this the Alpha family. So the Alpha family was, and by the way, all these are all sort of, names are changed to protect the innocent, but they're really amalgamations of clients. So at some level, I'm using these facts or this situation to make a point, as opposed to, this is more creative than science. How about that? I'm not trying to be scientific here. I'm using these examples of these family case studies to make a point. So, situation: Alpha family is a multi-generational family in a transition from, let's call it G1 to G2, and the office is embedded in an operating company. So there's a whole structure going on, and Alpha's looking for a family office head, somebody to come as a part of the operating company and help with the growing numbers of next generation, and help the next generation comprehend their daily lives and activities, and get their life skills in order, and how to buy a condo and get insurance on the car, but also think about more strategically about their lives, about their education, and about their life plan, and about their investments, and think about being involved in the operating company, which is the hope of the adults, and some basic financial planning, and living within your means, and all the things that people need. And when we talk to them, they said, what we need is we need a really good manager to manage this. Somebody who is like our CFO, or like our treasury guy, or like our real estate manager, or like our property head, and we need a manager. So okay, That's a point of view, but what did the consultative approach yield? So let's go to the next slide, Clayton. What the consultative approach yielded after interviewed all the stakeholders and confirmed the business model and created and agreed on a position description and formed a search committee and retained an executive search firm. You can see there's a real solid process playing out here. And got into it with the executive search firm, and the family demonstrated the maturity and the flexibility and the understanding of the quality of people that they were interviewing and what they were bringing to the table, and were able to adjust their criteria as the process unfolded. And that was due to great leadership by the search team. It was due to innate excellent business sense and a focus on the objectives by the family members who were on the search committee and the search committee itself. And it was also it also had a lot to do with the candidates who presented, because the candidates that were able to communicate around the vision that they got from talking with the family and interviewing with the search committee and going through the process, they were the ones that made it to the next round. And what happened was, at the end of it all, Alpha got somebody who was a leader instead of a manager. They got way more than they set out to get. And they got way more because they were open to different approaches to the position. And the different approach was that it was a much broader role and a much more comprehensive, a deeper role, a more intuitive and leadership role than just a technical and implementation kind of role. So they got more than what they originally wanted. And the candidate who got the position has a huge opportunity to execute on a model of great expansiveness and of real interest to that person. So that's one example, Alpha. Let's go to the next case study, Beta. Beta situation, multi-generational family, governed by brothers and sisters and cousins, and basic work of the office is to oversee an investment portfolio, and there's a team of people in the office. I mean, it's an office of, I don't know, 15, 20 people, something like that, and so there's a structure and corporate structure, and it's doing reasonably well, but the family is looking for more information, better information about their portfolio and its investment characteristics and what they should do, and so they, the coming up from staff is, hey, we should hire an analyst. So that's where we started. Let's hire an analyst to get more information. So let's take a look at what the consultative approach led to. So the consultative approach, again, after interviewing all the stakeholders, the business model that was in place really indicated what we didn't need more analysis. What we needed was strategic thinking. And when we talked, when we talked to the family about it, the strategic thinking was really, okay, hey, we need an investment advisory committee. And so after discussions about the role of the advisory committee and how it would interact with the CIO and the board or the family council, after all the sort of the details, the governance details were worked out, the search committee was formed, and found somebody who is currently a chief investment officer of a single family office, and very, very happy to serve on this board. So they got somebody who was kind of currently in a leadership, in a management role, to step up into a leadership role and be on a board. Now, board members are not managers. Advisory committees members are not managers. They're leaders. They're setting strategy. They're thinking about the future. They're executing on their view or their vision of the future state and directing management to do that. So what we did was this family shifted its thinking from needing a manager to getting a leader. And for them, I think the broader thinking about the business model really paid a dividend, paid a huge dividend. And they've got, I think they're very happy with the sort of conversations that they're getting now from the investment advisory committee. And what was in it for the candidate? The candidate got to step up from being in a managerial role to also playing a strategic advisory role for another family. So benefits on both sides. So let's go to the next case study, Delta family. Delta family, yeah. Sorry, I had Delta, it's called Gamma. Okay, Gamma. Well, Gamma, all right, Gamma is family governed by two brothers who serve as the investment committee, very small office. Gamma has been under-resourced for all of the typical back middle office functions. And what they really want is they want to improve their controls and reporting in the office for the family. So they're considering outsourcing back and middle office functions to an accounting firm and hiring an investment analyst. So the consultative approach paid dividends here too. So let's go to that next slide, Clayton. And what we see is that Clayton, on the next slide, we see that when a cost-benefit analysis was done about outsourcing, it was found to be, hey, that was going to be more expensive in the long run than just hiring a qualified person. Plus, if you hired somebody, you would have that immediate and control over that person's. You wouldn't be a client of somebody. So there's certain advantages to having staff in house, and it also showed that that the investment accounting and tax planning that were coming along with this individual were just really more important than investment analysis. Although, as an added bonus, this person had a lot of experience working in family office and investments, and was able to and serve as a CFO for this office. Had done that in other offices, and so really, we've got a super strong manager to fill the role instead of outsourcing and going to an analyst, which would have put more pressure on the two brothers to do more things themselves. So really what they got was they got somebody, a little broader thinking about their business model, paid them a dividend, but they also got a candidate who was just perfect and is just just doing an outstanding job in the role, super quality of life and a lot of satisfaction and just a really a terrific outcome for both sides, and it really came from the consultative approach. And I think that consultative approach is the best approach that you can employ. So let's go to the next slide, Clayton. And I think the next slide is question number 3. So according to the alpha, beta, and gamma cases, which approach gained the best outcomes for families and candidates? So it's one of these 3. It's either the command and control approach, it's the consultative approach, or it's the communal approach. And remember, you need to answer the questions if you want the CPE credit. and the CPE credit is available to you at the end of this session. You just need to tell us that you want it. But even if you don't want it, if you'd answer the questions, that would be fun for us to see how people answer the questions. And we are always excited about the answers. And 90% of you answered the question correctly. It is the consultative approach is the right answer. So let's move on to the next part of our webinar, and that is selection. So we covered search. I talked about how important understanding the differences between leadership and management, and that goes both for families and it also goes for candidates. So now we're going to talk about the selection process, and the selection process presents a dilemma because really the only way that you can get a highly functioning outcome is by committing resources, and this is the challenge. I think this is the challenge for families. By trying to do it themselves or by skimping on the resources, they probably will not get the best results for their search and as a result of their selection process. And I'm going to talk about some of the tools and methods that I think are most important in the selection process. But I think it's important, just before I leave this slide, to point out to you that Russ Prince, who is one of the top consultants to ultra high net worth and their advisors, says that those single family offices that commit resources to source high caliber talent, institute meaningful compensation arrangements, and provide consequential professional development are the ones that are usually high functioning, delivering results that are beyond the expectations of the ultra wealthy families. And Russ defines high functioning. I mean, Russ says that only 1 in 5 single family offices are high functioning. He says 1 in 5 are low functioning, and he said 3 in 5 are sort of dysfunctioning. So his point is that to be in the top 20%, you need to commit the resources to source high caliber talent. You also need to commit the resources as a family to create a meaningful compensation arrangements and provide professional development. So 2 to 3 things that one of the top consultants to ultra high net worth is recommending. So with that in mind, let's go to the next slide and talk about committing resources, because committing resources is a part of this equation that is sometimes a difficult part to overcome. Russ says that for best results, you got to commit resources to the selection process. So 2 kinds of costs. When we talk about committing resources, I think we're talking about committing people and money, right? And people equals time. So what are the 2 kinds of costs? Well, there's the soft costs and there's the hard costs. So soft costs are, oftentimes called opportunity costs. I mean, I think it's what the economists call it. Soft costs or opportunity costs include the value of the time spent by family, the board, everybody who's not getting paid, who's working in the office for the family on the search committee or in the interview process or the negotiations or whatever. The soft costs are, all the time, the value of that time that's spent, and that can be considerable. Meetings and interviews and decision making and letters and follow-up and phone calls and reference checks and you name it. It's a lot going on that that adds a lot of soft costs into the resource allocation for this effort. But there are also hard costs. And hard costs include consultants fees. So if you're taking the consultative approach, you might have a consultant involved, and you probably have to pay that consultant. If we're involved, we get paid. Likewise, if you create a search committee and you engage some, oftentimes consultants or other people that you know and trust and who know you as a family, and you want to be involved in the interviewing process, it's reasonable to compensate them. Obviously, if you engage a retained search firm, you're going to pay search fees. And those fees will sometimes be 20, 25, 30, 35, 40% of first-year comp, and there's usually some dollars committed up front, $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 up front to retain the firm for an exclusive search. And in exchange for that, you get their approach, whether it's consultative or another approach. You get them full-time working on your search. And helping you make the selection. You may have some legal fees because the person that you're interested in hiring may request a contract, or you may have a contract that you want in place, or you may have a non-disclosure or privacy agreement that you want in place before you embark on the interviews, and certainly before you hire somebody. There may be a contract or some further due diligence, background checks, and the like. And finally, there's hard costs connected with travel and other expenses for candidates who are coming in from out of town, which oftentimes happens. So the hard costs are not trivial, and you need to calculate those, and you need to calculate the soft costs. But the point is, they exist, and you need to commit resources, and you need to be sure that you are committed to the outcome by working with professionals throughout. I do not recommend that you do this on your own without some sort of professional help, whether it be a consulting firm, whether it be people that you know through a search committee, whether it be a retained search firm. Whatever degree, level, approach you take, I highly recommend that you work with people outside of your office to give you the perspective that you're going to get from people who are not directly involved in the day-to-day. So having said that, I'm going to move on to our next question. And our next question, question number 4, is which of the following is not a component of hard costs of the selection process? And that's the process I was just talking about, the hard costs. So which one is not a component? Is it legal fees? Is it retained search fees? Or is it accounting fees? Which one of those 3 is not a component of hard costs? So as always, if you want the CPE credit at the end, you got to answer this question. And this is the 4th question out of 6. So we're moving through the presentation here. And Clayton, I'm ready whenever you are for the result. And accounting fees is the right answer. So accounting fees is absolutely the right answer. And that was answered by 80% of the test takers, or the question answerers, I guess. And it's not really a test, it's a question. So 80% of the people who answered the question answered correctly. Accounting fees is not a component of hard costs. So, okay, so let's go on to the next slide. And this slide, I think, is kind of summarizes the whole selection process in a nutshell. I mean, or I don't know if it summarizes the whole selection process, but it definitely points out some of the issues that both sides have in this process. So, why is it so difficult to find the right position? And well, the reason is because, I mean, a candidate asked that question, and the reason is the family says, well, the candidates we're looking at, they don't have the breadth or the depth or technical skills or business acumen or business management. So, I think that's fair in a lot of respects. I know because when I promote a position, I get people who apply, who offer themselves up as candidates for the position, and they're not meeting the basic position description requirements, either for numbers of years of experience or professional certification or technical capabilities or some other variables in the position description. And so, I mean, obviously, if you don't make the black and white on the position description, you're not gonna pass that screen. So the real question comes down is like the people that do pass those screens of the position description, you go, okay, well this person has all of the attributes, all of the qualities that I'm looking for. So now let's go into the two reasons why it's so hard to find a candidate. And families say, the candidate just didn't fit within our family culture. And I'm sorry to say, but a lot of this is chemistry. It's driven by just the feel that people get in interviews, and interviewing is a really, really important part of the process, of the selection process. I can't downplay that. In fact, I have to upplay it, and I'm going to spend a little time on that in more depth in a few minutes. But family culture is really important. Some families are some families are secretive, some families are open, some families are welcoming, some families are reticent, some families are, or office environments are formal, some are very informal. If you're at the other end of the scale from the family culture in one of those kind of chemistry areas, that that can be a knockout. I'm sorry to say, but that's the way it goes down sometimes. And even though I do this, I'm not a perfect judge of it. I think that culture, there's not going to be a problem with the cultural fit, and sometimes there is. And then finally, a complaint is that candidates don't have the maturity, the experience, or the temperament. And that's another way of saying it's not quite culture. I mean, the culture is sort of internal from the family. This is like an external critique. Like, okay, well, that person's hasn't done this enough to make me really feel comfortable that I could trust them to do that for me, whatever that is. And so that's like that maturity. And maturity is not an age thing, of course, because age, you're not allowed to discriminate based on age. Maturity is more of a way that you present who you are and your experience in position or in similar position, and also it has to do with the how you present. It's not just the what, but the how, and that's kind of wrapped up in that temperament. So, I mean, you could say that these last two, if I fit in the family culture, they don't have the maturity, experience, and temper. You could say, well, those are sort of, I mean, John, I can't do anything about those things, but that's me, right? I mean, somebody like me would not be a good fit in an office where there's where enthusiasm or boisterousness or extroversion is not accepted. I would not be a good fit. It wouldn't, it just wouldn't work. I could have all the technical skills, but if the office didn't appreciate that or didn't want that, if that were not the culture of the family, I'm not going to fit there, and I'm not going to go to the next step. So some of this is it is driven by chemistry. But I think there are things you can do to overcome that. And I'm going to talk about those in a minute. But from the candidate side, you know, why is it so hard to find the right candidate? And the families are complaining. Well, I'll tell you why. Because, you know, families oftentimes don't recognize how much they should pay for top-notch talent. They think they're going to get it, you know, somebody who's really, really good, who's got all these qualities, fits the culture, got the maturity, got the experience, got the temperament, and they're getting for cheap. Not going to happen. And it's not going to happen because the market has been so lousy since the crash of 2008. And, you know, people who are really good at their jobs and have talent, well, they're not going to move unless they're getting some positive uptick, you know, in position and responsibility and in compensation. Let's be honest. So, you know, families, I think, need to increase their awareness that, you know, it is not, the market's shifting a little bit right now. I think it's probably still a buyer's market, but we're getting real close to being even Steven between buyers and sellers right now. There's a little heat in the market right now, and I think that families need to recognize they're going to pay up for top-notch talent. And secondly, you know, one of the things that families don't realize, because it's sort of an internal look inside, is that, you know, family offices are not always the most stable, long-term work environments. And what I mean by that is that, you know, you sign on with a family, you know, you're at their mercy. You got one client. You got one. It's not like a big corporation. I mean, and most states are right-to-work states now, and so, you know, the only way you'll be covered is through a contract. So, and it's a little bit like a prenup, right? But family offices, yeah, I think for the most part are stable environments, but not always. And depending upon the role of the position, you'll find that they flip through CFOs, or they flip through you know, analysts, or they flip through CEOs or heads of office. So that's a negative, and the family needs to do a lot to show that they are a stable environment and that this is a really good home. And then finally, you know, probably one of the top complaints that candidates have is, look, there's no place to go there. I mean, if I go there and I'm the CFO and I'm working for the CEO, and the CEO is 55 and I'm 45, you know, I'm not going anywhere. I mean, in that office, I'm not going to be the CEO. And you know what? They may not see you as the CEO material anyway, which is something that, by the way, it's one of the things that I think you need to talk about them. But career path is really important to some people, not so much to other people. And again, it depends on where they are in life cycle and, you know, kind of what their goals are and so forth. But it can be super important to candidates. So it's difficult to find the right candidate because there is no career path. It's kind of a dead, in a way, it's like, that's it. Even if you're the CEO of a family office, sometimes that's it. There isn't any, there is no advancement beyond that. So I think that those are some of the major reasons that I hear and I know are impediments to the process, both from family side and from candidate side. So, Clayton, let's go to the next screen and talk about assessment, because assessment is, like, I think, the most important part of this process, and the assessment and especially the creation of the position description and having a specific set of requirements around the position, what the role is. And then when you're doing the interviews, you need to screen for things. You need to screen for intelligence. I think you need to screen for intelligence more so than really just about anything else. Intelligence is number one. And the way you screen for it is you go after different kind of different attributes of the person you're talking to. You know, So you want to understand their intelligence from the perspective of their verbal ability, their numerical ability, their reasoning ability, their reading ability. And of course, and again, obviously I'm talking about executive positions here. I'm not talking about, words per minute or software, but I'm talking about, somebody who we're considering for a leadership or a management role. And so, we need to know that they understand the language, that they have the ability to communicate verbally. So we need to use industry language in our discussions with them. We need to make sure that they understand, financial concepts. So we need to ask them to comment on certain numerical concepps. And, if you're talking about market risk, you say beta. So what does that mean? Well, how do you measure beta, right? What is that? So, sorts of just kind of off the cuff, but ways to establish intelligence verbally through understanding of language and numerically through financial concepts. Also, reasoning. So, the reasoning is you pose a problem. Say, well, have you ever seen this, or has this ever happened to you? And how did you deal with it? And they provide you with some explanation of the situation and the way they responded to it. And then reading, I think, is one that's really overlooked, and it's oftentimes really important, especially when you're reading legal documents or you're reading investment manager letters, or you're reading other communications, or you're writing. Reading is, kind of the flip side of writing, but reading and writing, you need to be able to comprehend when you read. And so, really good way to do this is give somebody something to read ahead of time. Say, hey, here's an article I think is really interesting. I'd just like to talk with you about 2 minutes when we get together, and get their comprehension on it. And then finally, I think when you're interviewing people, you can interview for integrity, and you can screen for integrity. And there's a bazillion. If you're interested in this, I can point you to some really great sources for these types of questions. There's loads of them. So this is nothing. I'm not creating this. This is nothing new. This is something this technique that I use when I do what I do. And you just want to throw in a little question or 2 or 3 around integrity. This is an example of one. Is it all right to misrepresent the truth if being completely honest will create problems that small white lies can solve? So this is a real challenging question, isn't it? Like, is it okay to bend the truth? What do you think? Now, you can pose that as a black and white, never, yeah, yes, no, right? Never, always, or you can pose it in sort of a graduated scale. You find out how people think. Is there situational ethics, like depends on the situation, or absolutely not? So I think that's what you're looking for in these integrity screens, and they can be very, very useful to you. And I think intelligence and integrity are like the 2 most important topics, attributes that you're screening for when you're doing the assessment. So let's go to the next slide, and I'm just going to show an example of a structured question. And I grabbed this out of Society for HR Management Foundation, Effective Practice Guidelines, which is a terrific paper. If you're interested in this sort of stuff, it goes through all the dynamics. But I have built my thinking based upon SHRM, and so because I'm into structure and I'm into sort of doing things always the same way and being able to compare one to the other, which is really key. That's what we do in our consulting practice when we look at software, or we look at service providers, or we look at anything. We have a kind of a structured process and ask people the same things, and we do that when we interview people, our clients. So we try to get different perspectives from family members on the same issue. And it's very, very helpful to have a structured process. So anyway, this is an example of a structured interview question and, kind of rating criteria. And you can see, the Likert scale, 5 points on a Likert scale. And I don't need to read this to you, but the point is that you structure your interview questions to provide you with a way to understand this person's response, and therefore a way to compare respondents once the interviews are over. And by the way, this sort of thing, if you're like an interview, if you're part of a search committee and you're each interviewing individually, highly, highly recommend, because there's a huge bias that when two different people interview the same person, because some interviewers are real talkative. I mean, this is something I have to restrain myself on. I have to stop talking and let the person I'm talking to talk to me. So, that's a real problem. That can totally skew the interview. So if different people are doing the same thing, it's good if they do it using the same tool. So that's the message here, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that you engage that. By the way, people who are interviewing are in a position to structure this way, but also the people being interviewed are able to structure in exactly the same way. So let's go to the next slide, Clayton, and I just want to go through a few questions that I've adapted from a website that's got some interesting perspective, and really I kind of just adapting these so that you can see how a structured questionnaire set can make a huge difference. If you have 4 or 5 questions that you're asked, structured questions you're asking, and different people are asking, it just makes such a difference to then compare when you get back into the search committee and talk amongst yourself, or to compare, if it's just you doing it, to compare your answers. So, why do you want to work with this family or this office? How do you view the relationship between the family and yourself? Really a key question, because so many times people get confused about like who's the family and like who's important here. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. What challenges may arise? How do you manage these? And that's especially in relationship to the question that precedes. How do you see yourself in this ecosystem? And then, what are some critical things you've learned working with families? So those are like questions. I just throw those out as examples, but you want to have structured questions that you ask of your candidates. So let's go to the next slide, Clayton, and look at some questions that candidates can ask families. So, if you're just coming in cold, and make sure you've got some Google research and you've talked to the retained, the search consultant or the consultant or whoever, you've got some background. So and you sort of know who you're talking to, and you've done your best to figure out, where they fit in the mix and, what their history is and so on and so forth. But, one super open-ended question that you can learn a lot from is ask the person you're talking to about the culture of the family. And if you get to talk to more than one person, that's why these questions are so key, because different people will have different views on general culture, which allows you then to go back and ask some more questions, right, until you make the right decision. So I think it's also really important for you as a candidate to know, is professional development going to be available to me? Am I going to get training? Or what sort of educational programs because life to me is an education. So I need to continue to grow. And by the way, I'm a professional, so therefore I need to continue to take professional education. And and another big open-ended question: what are the big challenges facing the family? There's a reason why you're sitting there to be being interviewed for this position. Something's going on. What is it? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it normal? Is it abnormal? What's happening? Is it and how do you fit into that as a solution? And that's what or part of the solution, and that's how you manage that discussion. And finally, And this is really important because I can't tell you how many C-level people I know have no idea after they're hired how their performance is evaluated. Not in there. Never discussed. Not in there. And maybe the answer is, well, we don't do that. Well, wait a minute. Really? And so that is a source of great frustration and anxiety and, later, but why wait till later? Why not get it out now? And if the answer is, well, we don't do that, well, at least you know that going in. And you can't say, well, they didn't tell me they didn't do that. I mean, it's better to know now going in. So that gives you some ideas of questions for candidates and questions for family. And so let's go to the next slide, Clayton, which is question number 5. And question number 5 is asking, according to family office metrics, that's me and my colleagues, both families and candidates should have structured questions for the interview. True or false? So according to what I just said, should you have structured questions for the interview, whether you're being interviewed or whether you're doing an interview? True or false? All right. Good show. True. You should have structured questions for the interview. That is true. And I think I belabored the point earlier, but I'll just say it again. I do it. It's super helpful, especially when time goes by and it all starts to run together. It's really great to have a questionnaire that's consistent across all your applicants with their answers, because those answers to those questions will jog the memories that you have and will inform the decision that you ultimately make. So let's go on to the next topic, Clayton, which is compensation trends. And earlier this year, I think in January, we did a together and collaboratively with Trish Botoff, formerly of Grant Thornton. And Trish worked for Grant Thornton in their compensation and benefits practice for many years. I don't know, 7, 8 years. Trish is young. She's not, I would say many years, but she is now out on her own in San Francisco and Botoff Consulting. And so we put together a set of questions and polled, I don't know, around 50 family offices, 36 of which were single family offices. And so I thought it might just be interesting to share some trends off this survey. And by the way, this survey we're going to issue this survey in its entirety, I believe, later on this month or the first part of next month. I believe it's in final edit right now and should be available to you in its entirety within the next month, I guess. So something like that. So maybe sooner, maybe the next couple of weeks, but surely within the next 3 or 4 weeks. Okay. So compensation trends from the 36 family offices that we talked to, almost all are awarding a base salary increase this year. So that's good. 97% are awarding a base salary increase. So everybody's going to get a little bump this year. And the bump in 8 out of 10 cases includes or incorporates some sort of bonus or annual incentive or some sort of additional remuneration above and beyond salary, the annual percentage increase. So So these annual percent increase numbers don't necessarily represent the whole increase that individuals could receive, but I think that what we're looking at here is annual percent increase of base salary, and you see that most people are in that 3% range. So I think that's more than the CPI, but nobody's going to get rich on 3% raise. But it's a good, it's a good raise, and we see that almost a quarter are raising 4% or 5% or greater. So some people are going to do a little bit better, and it's I think it's pretty indicative of where the market is right now. Pretty conservative. I think that when we do the next segments in our webinar series, in fact, the final segment, the next segment we're going to do is managing human resources, and so that's going to be sort of internally focused and best practices focused, and then the third part of the series, the webinar series, I hope and I hope to have even more data around this, is going to be around compensation structures. So compensation, of course, is a topic of great interest to everybody because families have to pay it and they have to organize the programs, and employees get paid, and they want to know how they're going to get paid, and is it possible to defer some of the payment? Is it possible to co-invest? I mean, so there's lots of different ways to incent family office executives, and we're going to explore that in the third and final webinar called Compensation Structures, and I think that one's in June. And so that's coming up in June. But before then, in May, we're going to do our second in this series of webinars on managing human resources. So we are now, really, we're at the conclusion of our formal remarks, and I think we have one more question. Yeah. So according to a recent survey, the one I just spoke about, of family office compensation trends, 92% are awarding base salary increases for 2015. Is that true or false, according to the recent survey that I just presented on the last slide? So looking for the final question in the 6-question poll, and looks like I've got some questions for the Q&A. That's great. So Clayton, you can just post those answers whenever you get, and the answer is mostly people saying true, and only 13% answered false. Well, by the way, this was it's not a measure of intelligence, but comprehension. The number is 97%. So I don't know, Clayton, if you can go back to that slide, you'll see that the answer was 97%. So most people got that one wrong. That was, I said 92% in the question. And I hope that doesn't end on a down note, but that does conclude our formal remarks for this morning. And I've got a few minutes for questions. I don't know, Clayton, are there any questions?
Hi, John. Yeah, we do have a couple questions for you. The first one I have is, what do you see happening in the area of SFO information technology personnel?
Well, yeah, this obviously is an area where we're, very, very active, and we see sort of two branches in the evolution. One is that somebody in-house, like the CFO, gets more and more skilled in managing IT. It sort of serves as super help desk, super problem solver for everything application related, desktop related, and the like, except for infrastructure. So telecom and data management and servers and all that sort of stuff is either done in the cloud or done by some third-party contractor. So that's sort of one branch of the trajectory. So that CFO, that financial person, is becoming more and more of a tech person, and we're seeing that as I don't want to call it a requirement, but as a real benefit to the financial types out there. And that's sort of a trajectory for people who are, let's call them the accountants, the CPA types, to kind of head in that direction. Obviously, the other direction is tax. So, with the focus on tax, and then tax oftentimes overwhelms the accounting aspect. So, for people that are really interested in accounting, that's what kind of one track. The other track is to the cloud and external resource. So to the cloud, that's the answer, is software as a service. There is no help desk. Yeah, we got to buy some computers and stuff, but it's basically you just plug and play the software as a service to the cloud. By the way, everybody online, that's what we do at Family Office Metrics. We are totally in the cloud in terms of all of our software. Like, for instance, the software that I'm using right now to present this webinar in the cloud, I don't have to maintain it. I just subscribe to it. Same thing with my accounting software. Same thing with my CRM. Same thing with my document management. So that's what I see. I see total outsource on the one hand, and an expansion of the duties of the financial officer to comprehend IT and technical aspects. When it gets too much, the office gets too big, I see more often than not then a further split. Either we outsource to a firm that does that and serves as our outsourced CTO, or we hire somebody. And usually that's somebody who works for the CFO. So anyway, that's kind of what I see, Clayton.
Okay. All right, next question. If you're using a retained search firm and no candidate is chosen, does the money that you've already paid them get returned?
Good question. Depends on the contract you've got, but usually they will keep going until you fire them, and it usually says in the contract if you fire them, they don't have to give the money back. So I think the answer is, and of course this depends upon the contract, but I think the answer is, well, look, we're just going to keep working on this. I mean, I think the retained search firm might say, well, you're a difficult client, Mr. Family Office, because we presented you with 10 applicants and you've turned them all down. So we got to keep going. And sometimes they'll present and you hire and that person gets let go, and then they got to come back and find another one. So it really depends upon the contract. So read your contract carefully.
All right, next question. How and with whom do I set up a search committee to fill a position at my office?
Okay, really good question. I think that what you want to do is you want to have both people who are inside and you want to have some outsiders. So inside would be people from the board, from the family. If you, depending upon your structure in the office itself, it may be the head of office would be on the search committee. Obviously, if you're looking for a head of office, you probably won't have the head of office, the current head of office in your search committee. But you want some insiders, and you want some insiders who are committed to the vision for the office. So not just looking to fill a position, but are trying to realize the vision. So they need to be strategic insiders. And then I think you need some strategic outsiders. And those can be, well, I mean, an example would be me, for instance. I would be an excellent add to a search committee. Also, somebody who would be an excellent add to a search committee might be an attorney that you've worked with for a long time, who knows your family and knows the family office and knows the culture. I think what you're looking for in the outsiders is you're looking for domain experience and you're looking for technical acumen, right? You're looking for somebody who understands, who knows and has seen success in the position that you're searching for, and that who understands you. So those two qualities, I think, are key for search committee members.
Okay, here's, I think, one final question for today. Have you ever been fooled by results of the structured interview process that you described, and would you mind sharing what happened? If so.
Well, have I ever been fooled? Yes, I have been. Yeah, I mean, it happens. It's not a fail-safe. It's just a tool to guide you, right? And it's probably not even more important than your gut reaction or whatever you want to call it, your intuition. But it's a tool. Yes, I have been fooled. Okay, so in a recent search, I went through 20 applicants, got it down to 7, interviewed 5, landed on 4, and scheduled the 4 for the interview with the family. And one of the 4 that didn't show up for the interview, didn't call me, didn't call the interview, didn't call in, never called, nothing, 0, disappeared, vaporized. Now that's embarrassing, to go through a structured process, come up with a final, a candidate that you're now confident is capable, and you introduce to the family, and then have a major fail. I mean, that's just like a blowout. That's like driving the car off the lot and having the engine stop. I mean, that was bad. So, I didn't know what to do, except for I tried to reach the person. They never called me back. I emailed them, never emailed me back. I'm not sure what happened. I thought we had a great, when we left our discussion, it was all sunshine and rainbows, and I was like, wow, this person really has a shot, and but nothing, just vaporized. So basically I explained to the client what happened and said, my bad, and I have no explanation and no follow-up. So honestly, I really don't know what happened to that person, but it doesn't matter because it was all about my process. But I felt like my process was good. I'm going to continue to use my process, and that was just a bad, an outlier. That's the only way I can describe it. Anyway, we did find somebody for the position at the end, so all's well that ends well. But yeah, that's what happened. It has happened to me, and that's what I did. So Clayton, I think that wraps us now. I think we're ready at quitting time here. So I just want to say thanks to everybody who stuck in here with me on this this webinar. Really appreciate your input. If you want to reach out to me with anything, I am happy to discuss further. Don't hesitate, and look for you again in May for the next webinar, Optimizing and Managing Human Resources. So thanks, everybody, and we appreciate your attending and look forward to continuing the conversation when you're ready. For Family Office Metrics, this is John Carroll saying thank you and goodbye.